Hello, everyone, and hello, Emily. I am delighted to be here with Emily today. She's going to dive into the exciting topic of how to start a podcast, which is what I recently have been up to with my own podcast. So for those of you who do not know me, I'm Lais. I'm a healer, intuitive business coach, and I also do space clearings. And my newest addition, thanks to Emily, I'm going to share a bit about how I met Emily, but she's my podcast muse. So this whole podcast thing here, it's all because of Emily. I believe people are activators. So something happened when I met Emily that inspired me to start my own podcast, which wasn't on my radar at all. Of course, I knew about podcasts and the world of podcasting and how amazing it is for business owners. But it was something in Emily's energy that was like, yeah, you have to go for it. You have to start. And so here we are with female soulpreneurs growing their business. That's my podcast. And Emily, you are very much my guest of honor, my very first guest on the show with the exciting topic, how to start your podcast. But before we dive into all these different tips that I'm sure you have because you've been at it for a while, let me introduce Emily for all of those of you who do not know who she is. So Emily is a holistic health enthusiast and an avid spiritual seeker, as well as a wife and a mother. She's currently pregnant. I don't mind you sharing that I share this. She's
that's
stationed,
okay. Yeah.
she's stationed in Costa Rica, and her podcast is called The Healing Corner with Emily Tennison. And I really urge you to go follow it right now, or at the very least at the end of this podcast, because her podcast is amazing. She explores topics of alternative health, spirituality, metaphysics, body intelligence. She talks to healers, practitioners, industry experts, and you can find it everywhere where you can listen to podcasts. And this is how I met you, Emily. I met you, well, we met before, but we really went deeper into everything when I was on your podcast recently talking about space clearing, about my space clearing services, because you had hired me as a space clearing expert, and we were discussing what were the outcomes for you, your family. And yes, so I wanted to use this podcast to talk about podcasting, how to set podcasting up, but also be a guest speaker can do so much for your business. And I'm going to share more about this in a bit. But Emily, please share with us, who are you? Like, what were you up to before you started your podcast, and how did you even get to start your amazing podcast?
Lais, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I'm so excited and honored to be your first guest on your podcast.
So am I.
Yeah, obviously I'm a huge fan of you. So this is a treat for me. So I began actually blogging when my now 5-year-old son was just born. And it was because I was diving into baby nutrition and pregnancy nutrition, and in a way that I had never really cared or like done before. And so I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much, I should start blogging. And so I did that since like 2016. I was Instagram blogging. And when the pandemic hit, I was kind of growing tired of that format and was craving connection and conversation, particularly with other women and other I guess other women that I admire and wanted to learn from. So I thought, well, maybe I should transition this into a podcast because I'm kind of tired of like sitting at my computer typing. And so is the minute, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like the minute you kind of make this like new decision, things kind of fall into place. And so I was living in Chicago at the time, and my husband has a very good friend who is a voiceover talent in Chicago who had just started teaching people how to do podcasts. And so he's like, you should chat with my producer. His name is Dan Levy. He's amazing. You should chat with Dan. And I said, okay. And so I did. And he kind of showed me the ropes on how to get started and reassured me like, you know, anyone can do it. It looks intimidating, but let me help you, you know, with the initial steps. And so I was kind of like on surfing a wave, and I was just like, okay, I guess, excuse me, just have to go for it because he's ready to show me how to do it, and this is what I want. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it came to be. And
Wow.
um, for my particular podcast, I interview guests. That's the majority of my show. I do have some solo episodes, but I had to kind of line up a few people, to get going and work out everything that you need to do, right, when you're like learning something new. And so um, that's kind of how I got started. And it happened very quickly. Within a month, I was kind of up and running.
Oh,
So it was
wow.
great.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. Oh my
It
God.
was really exciting.
Oh, I can't
So,
wait to dive into the actual steps that you took, like the
yes.
initial things you had to do to set up a podcast. But also, I wanted to share my experience
Yeah.
of being in your podcast and what wonders that did for
Please.
my space clearing business. I mean, it
Oh,
was just
yeah. I'd love to
so,
know. Yeah.
yes, it's unexpected for me because it was always part of my business, but it was like sort of separate from my healing business, working with people. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them then would go on and order a space clearing for their homes, but what happened when I was in your show and I was discussing all about space clearing, you were asking questions and I was explaining and, diving really
Yeah.
into it. I guess it inspired people to reach out, and I was offering free assessments also as part of being part of your podcast, and people booked themselves in for this free assessment and went ahead and booked a full space clearing. And some of those people then continued to book other things with me. So it wasn't just the space clearing anymore. Suddenly it was my self-healing program or other things that I work with people on a one-on-one basis. So we are not shy on this podcast around sharing numbers because I really want to be transparent about everything. And numbers, I think, is important, especially for female soulpreneurs, which are the healers, the people who want to be of service, the wellness practitioners. They tend to have abundance blocks and be shy around money and asking for money and wanting, of course, to earn money, but, feel shy around it. But I was calculating today and I made so far $3,700
Wow. That's
by being
amazing.
on your podcast. Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. I
That's
have to
so
say, of
great.
course, you have a gift. I mean, you made me feel so comfortable and you were following up with me, asking questions. Are people booking in? And you were still sharing in your stories, like I think weeks or even 1 month after the podcast aired. So I just felt what an amazing experience. Like, what a gift. This
Totally. It's
moment.
like,
Yeah.
oh, thank you. Well, I mean, you have so much to offer, and it was such for me, it was such a pleasure to amplify, what you're doing and to kind of scream it from the mountaintops because I really truly believe in what you do. But I do find podcasting is an amazing channel for reaching an audience that you may not already have. So I'm so
Exactly.
happy to hear, that it
Yes.
was a
So I
success.
wanted to inspire female business owners to not just think about how to set up their own podcast, but to go after other podcasting opportunities for themselves, because indeed you reach a
Yes.
completely new audience that I had no access to
Mm-hmm,
before. And
mm-hmm.
in a way, it also helps you become a better podcaster because I know how you
Oh,
do
yeah.
it. So you're like my muse, and I'm like, I'm going to try and be as good as Emily.
I'm so honored. It's so great.
Which is
I
why
love
I'm
it.
so excited to dive into this today with you, because I'm sure I will be writing down some tips myself because I just started with my podcast and there's room for improvement, my dear.
Always, always.
So let's start. I want to know, anyone wanting to start their podcast right now, like what would be the very initial stages? Like what was the first thing you would advise them to do?
It's a great question. So, the first thing is to think about why you even want to start a podcast. Is it because you have a business? Do you have something to say? For me, it was like this burning like desire inside to talk about everything I'd been learning about nutrition and detox, and also to continue learning from guests that I admire. Like really, the podcast is like for me just an amazing excuse to talk to people that I admire in different industries and also want to learn from. And I really enjoy talking to people. So that would be the first thing, is like understanding your why. And then from there, it would be just deciding your format, if you want guests on your podcast, or if it's really going to be like a monologue and you kind of talking, do you want this to be a social experience? Do you want this to just be you chatting, and kind of putting your expertise or your thoughts out into the ether, right? Is this going to be, perhaps it started for me, it was like, I'm just going to do this for fun. This was like a COVID creative project. So I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, I wasn't putting pressure on myself to make it a business or to make it something, bigger than like it needed to be. It was just like, let's just dip my toe in and see how this goes. So yeah, I would say like the first thing would just be like understanding your why. And then from there, it's very kind of low tech. Like, you don't need expensive equipment. You don't need to pay for fancy software. There are some examples I can give later, or, at some point, of podcasts that are like very lo-fi that have millions of followers now because they've been doing it for years and years and years. And you can tell that, I'll just say it, this one woman that I really admire, her name is Molly McCord, and she has a podcast called Intuitive Astrology. And I have no idea how I came across it, but one day I started listening, and you can tell it's just her in her house using likely free software. And she's just talking. There's no music, there's no introduction, there's no guests. And she publishes twice a week, and she has millions of downloads, which feed her business directly. I mean, she has courses on astrology. She has a book now. She hosts retreats now. And so it's like amazing, right? Because her return on the investment is huge.
I think many of us, we want to try it out. We don't want to make this huge investment. So if I can share for myself as well, I was researching and I wanted to start for free, like with really low investment. I actually invested nothing because I had a sort of good microphone already. The Samsung Go something. But yeah, what is something that you would say in terms of microphone? Is there something you would recommend for a person who is starting out with a podcast and doesn't want to spend hundreds of dollars?
Sure. So if you have any kind of headphone with a microphone, so like, I'm using corded Apple, iPhone headphones right now. And so they have a microphone. I can plug it directly into my computer or my phone. So I have an iPhone, and that's what you can start with. You don't even need anything. You could also just record through your computer speakers if you really wanted to. So I ended up purchasing a nicer quote unquote headphone, microphone and headphone setup. And you certainly can tell the difference, between those two if you're really listening. However, you don't need that to get started at all. The most important thing in my mind is that your content is solid, because that will keep people coming back, right?
I love
you can always improve with time.
Yes. I had people ask me, they were so much in their head about all the tech side, and they were so afraid of starting it, and what do they need? And it's so reassuring to people to know you don't need anything, just have your content, right? Be confident about what you're sharing and your why, as you said. That's huge.
It's huge. And the software that you can use is free as well. I know that you are familiar with Anchor. I use Anchor.
Let's talk about Anchor. For sure. Not that we get paid for it. We are not any affiliate links here, but Anchor FM, I think it's called. It's an app. And why don't you take us a bit through the app and what you can actually do with it? And I think you have an extra app that you can also share about. Let's discuss the technical parts of it and this app and how it works.
Yeah. So I would, recommend taking whatever headphones and microphones you have. So we talked about the kind of the Apple corded headphones. I've had women guests use even like their kids, like gaming headphones, like that have a microphone, and they're chatting with friends. Like, I would just get your hands on something that can connect to your phone and your computer. And then I would go to Anchor, and I'm going to see what I'm not sure what the URL is, but It's just
I think you find it as an
anchor.fm.
app, or even
Yeah.
the desktop version also is available. Yes, that's right.
Yes. So what's great is that it's a spin-off or like sister company of Spotify. So it's directly linked to that app, which is huge. And what's wonderful is that you can set up an account for free on Anchor. So you can go there, plug in your information, what's the name of your podcast, all these things that you're going to sit down and figure out. And you are going to then be presented with like a dashboard of statistics that will fill in as you begin to use Anchor. So from Anchor, you can record yourself chatting. You can record, your whole episode if you wanted to, if it's just you by yourself. What I do is I use Zoom. So I'll record there, and then I can actually drag that audio file into Anchor and it will publish it for me. So you can use, it's very versatile. You can use other platforms. It doesn't care where the audio comes from, which is great. Mm-hmm. And then it will kind of automatically distribute it to all the major listening platforms that people are listening to podcasts on. So Apple, Spotify, and then it goes to like Google and random stuff, just all for free. Yeah. So, of course they say if it's free, then you're kind of the product. So I'm sure they're gathering statistics on us and like all this stuff, but it's wonderful if you don't want to be spending money on any fancy software. Yeah. So yeah.
I'm a huge fan. I mean, it takes a while to get yourself onto Apple. You have to go to all these different platforms, but once you're set up, I find once you record your episode and you release it, it really goes automatically to all these different places. And I couldn't believe it once I was on Apple Podcasts or like Spotify. Like, what?
Yes, it's amazing. Yeah. And it's so nice to not have to do it yourself, right? Like Anchor just takes care of it. You don't have to figure out like the logistics of anything. If you don't want to.
Because there's the part where you can put a description about what your podcast is about, but then also each episode has its own description. So can you share anything about SEO friendly content on how to structure it or what to include? Because I know many people want to rank on Google with their podcast or their website. So like, what do you do?
Sure. So I think what really helped me in the beginning actually was to narrow down my niche. So if we take a step back, if you're thinking about a podcast, for me, it's alternative health and spirituality. So I went onto Apple Podcasts and sort of browsed that category. There's a spirituality kind of category with all of these podcasts, right, that are all about spirituality. So if you go in, if I were to go into there, I can check out other podcasts and kind of just peek into their descriptions. So I'd recommend this for anybody to figure out what niche or industry you want to be playing in, and then go there and browse around, because I picked up a lot of tips by just looking at other people's descriptions. So what's a podcast description? So Anchor is going to ask you, after you kind of record your podcast, to describe the episode. Very short kind of title and description that will pop up on people's phones or laptops. It will also be something that, someone can scan quickly and be like, oh, do I want to listen to this one? And then after that, there's an area for you to plug in notes on the episode. So I do this where I note kind of all the topics we talk about. And it's an opportunity to put links. So if you and I are talking about a book, or if we're talking about one of your offerings, I can create a link so people can just like pull up the description, right? And be like, oh, I can't remember Lais's website. Like, I hope it's in here, and then they can find it and click on it and just have easy access. So you're putting in all of this content, all these great words. And then at the very bottom, I like to put hashtags for whatever's relevant for my episode. So for you and I put in, hashtag psychic healing, hashtag space clearing, hashtag, the things that I actually used on Google to search for you and find you. And there's really no limit, I don't think, to the hashtags that you can put. There may be a limit to the amount of characters within the entire description, but, on some episodes I have like 30 hashtags. Wow. And that can help with people searching, through either the podcasting, the Apple Podcast or Spotify forum, or, on social media or Google. So
amazing. So speaking about all the description, also this episode I will put in a description, and of course you will find Emily's podcast link there, or the few links that she has to the different platforms, her website, also the link to our podcasting that we did together about space clearing, you can find there. Just check out the description so you can go follow Emily. But that's so helpful. I already know how I can improve my own SEO. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. It's super
amazing. Fun. All right. So people know what kind of app to use. And of course, there's many, but both of us, we know about Anchor. But of course, people can research other things. I heard of Buzzsprout, or, other things that we cannot talk about because we're not on it. But of course, there is several platforms, and I'm sure they're equally good. Some might cost more money, but I think there's so many things for podcasters out there nowadays.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you don't want to sign up for like a Zoom subscription, right, you can do Zoom for free if it's under 40 minutes, and then just pull that audio file. I also use something called Zencaster, which is free. You can check that out. It has a very similar format to Anchor, where you can just record yourself chatting. You can also record with a partner and use that audio file and drag it into Anchor to publish. Wow. So there's lots of different options, and there's no need to get sucked into like, oh, I need, fancy recording software, because so many people are doing it for free. Yeah.
Now, I do happen to know, because you told me about the producer you work with. So my question is, because I'm not there yet, I haven't thought about like, what do I outsource? But I do want to outsource eventually. Like, what can I outsource? Like, how can somebody help me with my podcast?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I know Dan Levy has openings for clients, so he wouldn't mind me. He'll be happy that I'm talking about him. He helps me with all the back end stuff. So I love creating the content. I love finding the guest. I love creating the questions and having the conversations. I'm not a huge fan of learning how to optimize audio or cutting out mistakes, quote unquote, or, just putting in music, right? I have no interest in that. And he loves doing that stuff. So he'll do all the back end things. And I've chosen to have music on my podcast, which you absolutely do not need. I've chosen to record separately, like an introduction and what they call like an outro, like a sign off. So before and after my guest episode, I record, separately. And so he helps me cut all that stuff in and make it sound very seamless for a very reasonable cost. And so he can do all that. Excuse me. And he's also very well networked, and he's been in the industry for such a long time. He has his own podcast. And so a good producer will be able to help you with, here's where you can go find music for very cheap. Here's where you can go buy a microphone and a headphone set. Here's what I use, that kind of stuff. So when you're feeling ready to enter that, enter that space, a producer can help you with that.
That's so helpful to know that there's help available, and what kind of help, because like you, I love having the conversations, the connections, the ideas, and then knowing that somebody can do the audio bit, improve that, and I don't know, give me tips on how to speak better, or I don't know, record better and do outros and intros. Is that how you call it?
That's kind of what I call it. Yeah, that's what he calls it too. It's like, kind of a separate introduction, kind of introducing the episode, and then like a sign off. But, that's something that many, many, many podcasters, maybe the majority, will do all in one shot. They'll hit record, they'll introduce the guest or the podcast episode, they'll do the episode, and then they'll record kind of the sign off all in one recording, which is perfectly fine as well.
I love it. I was laughing recently because we were exchanging voice messages, and you not called me out, like very lovingly. You told me, Lais, you're not using your podcast at the end to actually tell people how to find you. I was like, damn. It's like, what's the point,
Right. Well, I mean, if you have something to offer, doing a sign off that, just reiterating, like, here's where you can learn more about me. Here's my website, because a lot of people maybe aren't going to find you through your website or through social media. They may stumble across you on Apple Podcasts and be like, who is this woman?
Yes.
So yeah, it's, you have so much to offer. So it would be nice, just to remind people where they can go.
Yes, I think that's such a great tip that we as female solopreneurs, when we have our own podcast, that we don't forget to talk about where people can find us, be it the website, be it the service, a freebie that we're offering, right? It's like any links, and tell people to go into the description, because not everybody will find the description so just mention it at the end.
Exactly. It's such a great thing. You could also do it at the beginning if you really wanted to. I tend to like the sign-off piece, but it's whatever you want. And that's the best part about podcasting. It can be literally whatever you want it to be. There are no rules really at all.
That's what I love about it. You can just get started. You don't have to get caught up on the pricing, on the tech. Like, as you explained, you can also up level as you go. You can outsource as you go. You can learn about SEO as you go. Like, I'm probably have like 3 episodes up there yet, and yours being the 4th one. So I'm pretty much learning as I go. And then obviously you're my muse, so I keep learning new things. So what I would like to discuss is the mindset, because I know so many people block themselves in terms of being visible. And of course we are recording now here and I know you, but like, what about when we don't know the people and we feel like self-conscious? Like, have you ever felt self-conscious about interviewing somebody? And what is your tip? How do you deal with that?
Sure. That's a great question. In the very, very beginning, I was so grateful that my producer recommended that I practice talking to a recording of myself, right? Like recording myself talking, because you get used to just your cadence, and it helps, I think, with me anyway, the anxiety of having a guest on. So I would record myself talking for 5 minutes straight about a topic that I was interested in. So at the time I was interested in baby nutrition, or I was into, I don't know, a certain form of detox. And so I would recommend anyone to do this and make like a bulleted list of what you're going to talk about. So you can have the bullets kind of on your screen or next to you in a notebook, so that it keeps you on track without you just like reading from a page. And so you can go back and listen and understand, how many times am I saying, where am I getting held up? Where, what's awkward, or what's really great? Like, what am I doing that's awesome? And that really primed me to then feel confident to record with somebody else. So that's what I would recommend first.
I love it.
Yeah. And then I would say too, like, one thing that really helped me actually was chatting with a guest who reminded me that, the podcasts that we like to listen to, it's because we want to be in that person's energy. And so perhaps it's like a self-esteem exercise and some courage to understand that there are people out there that need what you have to offer, who are going to enjoy what you have to say, who are going to like the style in which you podcast. And I find that if I'm excited about my subject matter, and if I'm excited about how I'm doing it, the right people will find me. And my goal was never to have like a big, big audience. It was to just have some fun and provide some value along the way. And that's what's happened. And I'm fortunate to have people reach out saying, I really look forward to new episodes by you. I really enjoy how you do things. And so, that's what I would say, is like to just, to have the mindset that, you know what, someone else is going to enjoy, what I'm doing. And I just need to be confident and trust that.
I love it. Now, talking about, you already shared how you started your podcast and how you overcame maybe potential mindset issues, but what was your initial first big milestone where you remember, I was so proud when that happened?
Oh gosh. Well, let's see. It's a really good question. I think I mentioned to you that I was proud when I got all my ducks in a row tech-wise. So, in my very first episode, I thought I had tested out my microphone and all my things and everything was on, but actually nothing was on. And so like, everything recorded through my computer speakers, which is fine, but it wasn't quite as polished as I was hoping. So once I got that figured out, like episode 2, I was like, okay, I'm doing much better. I'm doing great. I remember feeling proud that for the first, I think 10 episodes, every single guest said yes to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would reach out and saying, hey, I'm starting this new podcast, which means like, I don't have any followers. I have nothing, to offer besides this beautiful like transmission that you're able to promote on your own website and have for your business. So I would love, I really admire the work that you do. Would you like to be on? And people would respond right away saying like, yeah, I would love to. And so that kind of gave me confidence that, gosh, people want to talk about themselves, right? And I'm providing a platform for self-expression and also for business promotion. And so, I wasn't an expert in the beginning, and I felt, just very proud that like I had something to offer, even though I was brand new. And so I would say like the first 3 episodes I was quite proud of, even though it was like, I look back and I'm like, wow.
I love it that you dove right into it and you asked experts you were following and you were not afraid to go there and just ask them, which is huge, because I know myself, I would have all these fears. Oh my God, they don't know who I am. And I'm such a little podcaster right now. Why would they come on my show?
Exactly. I know. And you kind of have to move beyond that and just think like, actually, I do have something to offer. And if I'm not my own biggest fan, why would someone else also be championing me? Like, I feel like that self-confidence has to radiate through on some level, even if it's very small, so people feel good.
Anybody listening to this who are new to podcasting, who are thinking like I'm doing now and how you do it, to invite experts into their podcast, that it feels so good to hear that you can just go and ask and be confident. And I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? If they say no, so what?
Right. Exactly. And I also find a couple other things. Like one, I think being organized on your own end and having some things figured out gives other people confidence. So when I'm reaching out to a guest, I'll email them pretty succinctly, like what I, who I am, what I like about them, and what I want to talk about. And, if you want, I would sign off saying like, if you're interested, I'd be happy to, or I'd love to send you more information on how we would proceed. And so, I mean, if someone were to reach out to me and be like, I want to have you on because you have something to talk about. Like, of course, I feel like that's not only flattering, but also just like, wow, I can provide value in a new way. And I think a lot of people want to do that. Secondly, I don't know if you're familiar with Jenna Zoe. She's like a human design expert. She created an app. Anyway, she has a podcast, also very kind of lo-fi and grassroots, but she had a guest on named Keith Ellis, and he's a life coach. He works in the like Akashic records, but he had this beautiful thing that has stuck with me for a couple of years where he said, it doesn't really matter what level you're at, so long as you get started, because there are people that will get value out of what you're saying, even when you're not an expert, or even when you're not doing it perfectly, quote unquote. And as you continue to evolve and get better, you just kind of reach the next level of people who are then attracted to that frequency, attracted to that energy. And so I just found that so like refreshing, because it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be perfect. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes. Gosh.
So yeah.
Talking about other podcasters, what are your 3 favorite ones and why?
Oh gosh. Right now, I would say Molly McCord from Intuitive Astrology that I mentioned.
Yes.
I just love her because, as I mentioned, she's not fancy, but her content is insanely good. It's just so good. No one does what she does. She basically like reads, the astrology of the week, but she adds her own intuition, and she's getting downloads, and, things are happening while she's on the show. They're also very short. They're like 30 minutes. Secondly, There's an intuitive woman named Nikki Novo.
Mm-hmm.
Her podcast is called Ask Nikki Novo.
Mm-hmm.
And she will do live readings like on her podcast. And I'm interested in it because it's different than any other podcast I've listened
So
to. Like
true.
she reads, what she does, sorry, she has people call in to a phone number and leave a voicemail message asking a question. So she'll choose 2 questions and she will basically do like a psychic reading or like an intuitive reading live to answer their question. And so the theme is always like the questions are related to each other, but they're different. And then she does like a live reading on something happening in pop culture, which I'm not really tuned into, but I still find it interesting that she can read like the higher selves of celebrities, like, and she,
wow.
like she'll pick like a hot topic, and I have no idea like what's happening with celebrities, but like I'm familiar with certain ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I like her energy. I like her, I like her style. And so I like to tune into that. And hers is a bit more like produced. She has music and stuff like that. But I find it to be just a cool format. I don't know anyone else that's doing that. And then let's see what else. The last one would be either like Almost 30. I don't know if you're familiar with those girls. They're 2 Americans.
No.
They're one of like the most popular podcasts within the wellness industry. They are highly produced. They use music. They have like fancy equipment and stuff now. They've been doing it for 5 years. And also the Expanded podcast by Lacey Phillips. Mm-hmm. They're kind of in the, she's like a manifestation coach. And I remember picking up a lot of things from her podcast that I use in mine. So she always does like a highlight, a short little, 10-second highlight from the episode. She puts it in the very beginning to kind of like rope you in and like give you a sense of the essence of the podcast. And so I remember really liking that and thinking, oh, I want to do that for mine. And so it's okay to beg, borrow, and steal, from other people's podcasts to be like, gosh, I really love the vibe of the music, or I love how they do a highlight in the beginning, or, whatever it is. Because that just makes yours better. We're kind of all making ourselves better, that way. So yeah, I guess that's 4, but those are kind of the ones that I enjoy.
I love giving tips for people who are starting out with their own podcasts to go research those podcasts and see why they're so good, or make their own research, of course, as well. But
of course,
it's always so amazing to hear.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, there's one more. The one I should have said is Design Matters by Debbie Millman. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's an American. She's like, when you're talking about muses, like she's kind of my idol within the podcasting industry. Not everyone will resonate with her style, but she is very, very good. She's been doing it for almost 20 years, which is really old for podcasting.
Yes, definitely.
She started out talking about design. She's a graphic designer. And now she talks about like the creativity of people's lives, basically. But
what a beautiful topic.
Very good. Yes. And the reason I like her is because she is very well researched and she goes very in depth with questions, and she interviews. So she's not just asking like, tell me about yourself. She's like, I saw that back in the 80s, you were in a movie and it was a very like small role, but and then she'll like figure out like this amazing question out of that. And the person's like, oh my gosh, wow, you really have dove into my life, and I just find that refreshing, because it's like, I don't know, it's a very efficient use of time in my mind to find out a lot I somebody in a short amount of time. I definitely have to check
out those 5. Thank you so much for giving all these tips.
Yeah.
Podcasters, let me know. I'm so curious. I mean, you've been podcasting for how long? Is it 1.5 years now?
It's actually 2 years. So it'll be 2 years at the end of the month. Mm-hmm.
Oh, congrats. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
So speaking of that, I mean, you've been 2 years podcasting now. Like, is there something that is coming up for you with the podcast? Like, is there anything that we can look forward to hear from you?
Yeah. So I have, my family and I moved to Costa Rica about 6 months ago. So it's been a little slower as we figure out where we're living and the pace of life here. So I've been publishing a little less frequently, and through that have been thinking about how I can still add value. And actually you helped put this bug in my ear, was like, why not create a course? And so I've been thinking a lot about and creating kind of an outline for just a short, simple course for anyone that wants to get started. So that's currently kind of what I'm working on, to be published at a future date once I figure out the format. But yeah, just how to help other people do what I'm doing and enjoy the process. Yeah.
Yeah, so make sure to follow Emily. So once she announces her course, that you'll be the first one to hear about it, because I know I will be passing on the link to everybody I know.
Yes. Thank you. I was going to mention too, you were talking about how important or how fruitful it can be to be on someone else's podcast. There is a platform called Wildcast, and it is, I think it's gowildcast.com or something like that. You can Google Wildcast and you can set up a profile there, talk about what you do, and then it basically is like a LinkedIn for podcasters. So people can invite you to be on their podcast, or they can ask like, no. And it just came to my mind today where I was like, oh, I got to tell Lais.
Yes.
So I've found, or I've connected with a few people on there, and you can also, promote everything you're doing. So you can say, I've been on all these other podcasts. Here's my website. Here's what I do, so just another channel, right? That's free, that can provide value for you.
This is invaluable. I think anybody listening to this, they should jot down this website, because that's the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm going to hop on this website and I'm going to make my presence known.
Yes.
Wow. Are you on there?
I am on there. Yeah. Oh. And a couple years ago, I joined it, and yeah, it was great, just to connect, and you can kind of browse and see like who else is in your industry and find guests that way too. Yeah. I've had a lot of people reach out to me personally asking to be on, or asking if I could, interview them. So just another resource.
Oh, love it. My God, this episode is so rich in tips, and my God, I can't wait to share it, upload it everywhere.
I'm glad.
Gosh, yeah, I'm completely in a happy bubble here.
Oh, good. Well, I think it's great what you're doing. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I think I don't have any follow-up questions. I know I'll interview you again at a future stage, which we already discussed, to go more into how to grow a podcast. Today was more about the initial stages and a few tips about how to start a podcast and all the setup. At a future date, in a couple of months, I would really love to dive into how to grow a podcast, like common mistakes that people make, that you can give some tips not to make them. Like my own, when I was not using the outro to sell my website or my services. These kind of things.
Perfect. Yes. I love that.
So expect Emily to be back on my podcast. And yeah, having said all that, go check out the description now for all of those who are listening. Check out her links, subscribe to her podcast. All the links will be there. Her social media handles are there, mainly on Instagram. Are you anywhere else? I think LinkedIn, I saw you as well.
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm only on Instagram, really, like social media wise. And then my website, healingcorner.net, awesome. Which has my email, and people can get in touch or learn more there as well. Yes,
so check out her website, her podcast, her Instagram. And Emily, thank you so much for your time and your energy. I feel so honored to have you as my first guest and my podcast muse.
So it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I am signing out now with my outro, which is keep listening to my podcast, Female Solopreneurs Growing Their Business. There will be many more episodes coming, solo casts, and also me interviewing other people. So goodbye, everybody.